K-E-double-N-E-D-Y. Jack's the nation's favorite guy.
June 1961, less than 5 months into his presidency, 44-year-old John F. Kennedy arrives in Paris with high hopes.
The presidential plane landed at Orly Airport in Paris. President Charles de Gaulle greeted the American chief executive. Mr. Kennedy described the purpose of his journey to Europe in these words. Two aims of American foreign policy above all others were the reason for the trip. The unity of the free world, whose strength is the security of us all, and the eventual achievement of a lasting peace.
The French rolled out the red carpet for the glamorous young president and his French-educated wife, Jacqueline.
Mrs. Kennedy, as most people would have expected, has also been a great success.
Next stop, Vienna, Austria, for Kennedy's first in-person talks with Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev.
His arrival is greeted by bigger throngs than greeted the Russian, as he heads for the American embassy and the first rounds of discussion with Khrushchev.
Just weeks after the failed US-backed invasion at the Bay of Pigs in Cuba, Kennedy had called the summit with no fixed agenda.
Now, in the spring of 1961, Vienna offered its hospitality for a personal meeting between two world leaders against a background of historic landmarks.
Beyond historic landmarks, the more important background was in neighbouring Germany, split between the communist East and the democratic West since the end of the Second World War. The divided former German capital Berlin, locked deep in the East, loomed as a flashpoint. Almost 3 million East Germans had fled to the West through Berlin. Khrushchev described it as a bone in his throat and the most dangerous place on earth. It was the place where the end of the world could begin. Khrushchev went to Geneva with a clear mission. He planned to sign a treaty with East Germany in preparation for control over all of Berlin, whether the US agreed or not, risking war, but in the Soviets' view, possibly defusing a time bomb. The summit began badly. An underprepared Kennedy did everything he'd been advised not to do, getting sidetracked debating ideology, defending British imperialism, conceding Soviet and Chinese military strength. His inexperience showed. It was a far cry from 2 years earlier when the man Kennedy beat to the White House, Vice President Richard Nixon, went toe-to-toe with Khrushchev in an impromptu exchange at a Soviet trade fair.
And the story of the fair itself is eclipsed by a crackling exchange between Nixon and Khrushchev, begun off camera and finished off before the American Ampex color videotape recorders.
In what came to be known as the kitchen debate, Khrushchev predicted Nixon's grandchildren would live under communism. Nixon countered Khrushchev's grandchildren would live in freedom. But unlike Nixon in Vienna, Kennedy was pushed around by the Russian. Some progress was made on the future of Laos, but Berlin remained a dangerous sticking point. Khrushchev warned it is up to the US to decide whether there will be war or peace, to which Kennedy replied, "Then, Mr. Chairman, there will be war. It will be a cold winter." Far from appearing strong, Kennedy's threat projected weakness, as he later confided to newsman Hugh Sidey when he talked about how a nuclear exchange would kill 70 million people in 10 minutes. Khrushchev just looked at him as if to say, "So what?" In front of the cameras, Kennedy tried to put a positive spin on things.
I will tell you now that it was a very sober 2 days. There was no discourtesy, no loss of tempers, no threats or ultimatums by either side.
Well, that's if you don't consider talk of World War III a threat, I suppose.
No advantage or concession was either gained or given. No major decision was either planned or taken. No spectacular progress was either achieved or pretended.
Off the record, JFK admitted Khrushchev beat the hell out of him. In the weeks and months ahead, the fallout from the talks in Vienna were clear for all to see. Construction began on the Berlin Wall. More desperate East Germans tried to cross into the West before their avenue of escape was blocked.
East Berliners who have apartments facing the border take the long chance when they get orders to leave their homes for the interior. While an East German guard attempts to yank her back to prison, West Berliners pull her to a fire net and freedom.
And yet, Vienna provided a hard-learned lesson for the inexperienced American president. Many historians now say it stiffened Kennedy's resolve to never be underprepared and steamrolled by Khrushchev again. It helped Kennedy to stare down the Soviets when they tried to set up missile launch sites in Cuba the following year, again taking the world to the brink of war, before the Russians finally blinked. 28 years later, the Berlin Wall came down. A year after that, Germany was reunited. By then, Kennedy and his Soviet counterpart were long dead. But Richard Nixon lived to see he was right. Khrushchev's grandchildren did live in freedom. In fact, several became American citizens.